Ilana, maybe you can stay there. The Lib Dem MP, Christine Jardine, is part of Dignity in Dying. Good evening to you, Christine.
Good evening.
Good evening. And the author Paul Carroll applied to join the Swiss assisted dying organisation Dignitas, but changed his mind and tore up his membership papers. Tell us why, Paul. Good evening.
Good evening. Well, the reason I tore up my application for Dignitas was two key factors, really. One, I started writing a novel about assisted dying, which followed the trajectories of four individuals who had elected for an assisted death for a variety of reasons. And that led me to do extensive research into assisted dying I started writing the book 3 years ago. And what I discovered in terms of how the laws had unraveled, shall we say, in the countries where assisted dying had already been introduced, basically rang a lot of red flags up in my mind. And at the same time, coincidentally, I went through three close bereavements: my mother, my mother-in-law, and an auntie. And actually was present, watched their final days, watched their final years, really, as they moved towards death. In the case of my auntie and mother, they were in the 90s. My mother had vascular dementia, but my mother-in-law, at the age of 69, was diagnosed with cancer and didn't last 11 months. So that was all very, very raw when I was researching Shaking Hands with Elvis, the novel that I wrote. And it came through, and I thought at the end of that, and the book is not a treatise in favour of or against, the reader can decide, but I decided personally, which is what I can talk about now, that it wasn't for me. And I am very concerned at the direction of travel, shall we say. I think it's right that there is a law, that there is a debate, but I do hope MPs look beyond what I would call the emotional argument and look at the facts, especially how the law has unravelled in other countries.
But this is often about two people who are in love. The person who's dying, the person who will help them and understands them and is there to protect them and wants them to end their life as they wish to. And that all is emotional. You're talking about taking the emotion out of it, Paul, and I understand why you're saying that. But actually choosing to die when you want to, how you want to, is incredibly emotional. Doesn't make it wrong that it's emotional, does it?
No, but a law has to be brought into existence for the basis of the wider society. At the moment, whilst Ilana's example there is heartrending, one empathises, one heart goes out to it. It must have been horrendous for them. That doesn't mean that a relaxation of the law, which it would be, will bring other people into the net. Interestingly enough, motor neuron disease would not be covered by the proposed legislation that's going to be discussed in 2 weeks, because it's the doctors would have to say a patient had 6 months or less to live with a terminal disease. And my understanding is that motor neuron disease would not qualify for that. So in the end, you either say, how do we keep this rule, which everybody promises that will never be changed, but nobody can say it can't be changed, because the very fact that the campaigners at the moment are trying to change the law means it could be changed again once, say, it did come in. And if you look at countries like Belgium, Holland, Canada, do we really want to end up where literally in Canada 4% of the population now is an assisted death? Terminal illness is not a consideration. Do we want that in this country? Because nobody can guarantee that we won't get it. And this is what I want politicians to take a close look at, as well as the individual cases, as touching and moving as they are.
Well, Christine is one of those politicians. Share your thoughts with us, Christine. Good evening.
Good evening, Stephen. It's fascinating listening. And I fully appreciate why Paul changed his mind, if you like. But for me, it doesn't change the fact that there will be people who wish to end their lives in the way that they want, at the time that they want, because they have been given a terminal illness. Now, a terminal diagnosis, I beg your pardon. Now, I don't know what I would want to do in those circumstances. This is not about what I think is right, but I don't feel that I have the right to deny anybody else that choice. And I hear Esther Ransom talk about it, and I recognise what she's saying, and I hear that she is in a position where she feels it would be best for her. It's what she wants. She doesn't want to go through a death that is beyond her control, and it is the last choice that any of us can have. And I just feel, whenever I listen to anyone, I feel they may choose an assisted death, they may choose palliative care, but that choice is theirs. And I think that we owe it to individuals to give them that choice, to give them the right to choose. We should protect, with the law, the parameters so that it can't be abused. And from what I understand, we don't know all the details yet, but from what I understand of what Kim is proposing and the law that she would bring forward would be a choice at the end of life.
Yeah, but it's about whether you can protect that person, isn't it? It's ultimately about, can you protect that person for sure?
But if you look at and one thing I would take issue with was Paul talked about the law unravelling in places. One point I would make it is that nowhere that assisted dying has been introduced have they gone back on it. No country has said this is a bad idea. It's not working. We need to go back on it. Every country where it's been introduced, it has become accepted and regarded as a valuable piece of legislation. Now, I don't think for a minute that everyone who is given a terminal diagnosis and who thinks about how the life will end will choose an assisted death. I don't think that for a moment, and I don't think they should choose that, but I think they should have a choice. And I think that the law should make it a very narrow definition, as has been discussed, as Kim has suggested, and is being debated in the Scottish Parliament shortly. Liam MacArthur, my colleague, is proposing a bill that would do exactly that, a very narrow definition, a short period, a terminal diagnosis, the consent of two doctors, guaranteeing that the person is of sound mind when they make the decision, that it is their decision. And I just feel that we need to debate it. We need, at this point, to take out all the arguments and look at them closely and decide whether or not it's what we want for our country. Now, whether or not we decide to go down that route, I think it's important that we have the debate. Now, I know which side I am on in the debate, but I think it's important that we have it, and that at the end of the day, the decision that we come up with is one that has been debated nationally. It's in the Scottish Parliament, or will be shortly. It's been debated in Jersey. It's been debated in the Isle of Man. We need to recognise that there is a public momentum for this, a feeling that the time has come to debate it nationally, and we need to do that in the Westminster Parliament.
Paul?
I think we do need to debate it in the Westminster Parliament, and I think that MPs need to look at the facts, come to the conclusion that the law should not be passed, and to protect people who would otherwise be vulnerable. When we look at other countries,
but
it's very true, Kristen, that nobody's revoked the law once it's come in, but everybody's watered it down. You don't need to be terminally ill in Belgium, in Holland, in Canada to apply for
not
an
everybody.
death.
Not everybody.
They're about to change the law in Canada where people with mental disorders can apply for assisted death. Now, everybody says the cast iron guarantee, it will only be for terminally ill people with 6 months to live, giving their own permission for this. It got challenged after 3 years in Canada. It was declared constitutionally unfair that only a person who had terminal illness could apply for an assisted death. Why couldn't other people apply? And that is why that law is broken down. There are 4% of deaths in Canada, as I mentioned, are now assisted death. But in numerical terms, that's 15,000. Nobody ever says on the assisted dying lobby how many deaths is acceptable. Because if we followed the Canadian model, that would mean, given our population size, 30,000 people, 30,000 people, 30,000 people, 30,000 people, 30,000 people, 30,000 people a year would be having assisted deaths. Would we consider that a successful number or a modest number?
We wouldn't follow the Canadian model. The model that everybody's talking about is the Oregon model in America. And what we would do is we've looked Dignity in Dying, and everyone who's concerned in this has looked at other countries and how they have developed and what the best examples are, what the best practices are, how they've protected people. And you talk about protecting people, and I absolutely agree with you. Two things that I believe is, one, that we should improve the quality of palliative care in this country.
Exactly.
I think it's absolutely essential. But we also have to recognise that while we protect people's right to the best possible palliative care, we also should give them the choice that if that's not what they want, that's what they should have. Now, should we have safeguards? Should we make sure that it's people's choice? Yes, we should. But the reason that I feel so strongly about this is that it has always been kind of there in the background, and people have always kind of said, oh, but, assisted dying is a possibility. But in Scotland, it must be at least 15 years ago, Margot MacDonald, the MSP, twice brought forward laws to bring in assisted dying. And I had known Margot when I was a young journalist, and I wrote about assisted dying and the concepts. And she contacted me, and I went and spoke to Margot about why she felt so strongly about it. And in that discussion, I came to realise that it was not just something which is a hypothetical or a principle. To people who are facing a terminal diagnosis, it is a very real choice that they would like to make for very many reasons. Often it's, as
Are you at your most rational? Are you at your most rational,
well,
Christine?
that's one of the,
when you're facing that diagnosis.
But that is one of the things which the law that is being debated in Scotland, and I'm sure Kim will bring in her end of life choice bill. That is one of the things that has to be protected, that someone will have to undergo an assessment to make sure that they are of sound mind, and there will be a cooling off period when they can change their mind. But speaking as I was about Margot, speaking to someone who is in that position, who knows that their life is going to end soon, and they know that they will have to go through a lot of pain, that their family will have to go through a lot of pain. If they want to make that decision, I'm not saying it's the right decision or the wrong decision. I'm saying that I believe it should be their decision, not my decision or court's decisions or doctors' decisions or anybody else, their decision. And that they shouldn't be denied the right to say, I'm really sorry, I don't want to go through that pain. I don't want to go through that suffering. And I want, as Esther Ranson has said, my family's last memories of me to be ones that are positive and happy. And I don't want...
Well, even how you're framing that, Christine, and I'm not trying to be facetious with you, but if we listen to how you've concluded that, you've said that person who's deciding whether to take their own life, that part of that decision might be what their family's memories are of them. In other words, they're doing it for the benefit of their family, not themselves.
But they are.
Isn't that a danger?
No. No. What you're doing is extrapolating. Oh, if they're doing it, no, they are doing it for themselves, because what they want is a certain end to their death in certain circumstances. They don't want to go through that pain and suffering, and for other people to see it and experience it.
For other people to experience it, so they're doing it partly. And look, it's normal. It's normal human emotion, isn't it,
Stephen? Could you let me finish? The thing is, it's hugely emotive, and you and I, fortunately, are not in that position, and hopefully will never be. But if you speak to people in that situation and you hear them say, I want the choice and I want to be able to do this, and their choice is between suffering or ending that suffering at a time of their choosing in the manner that they want. Why should we deny them that choice? That's my issue with it. It's not what I think is right or what I think is wrong, because in that situation, I don't know what I would want. But I do know that I do not think it should be anybody's choice but mine. And I would not deny that choice to anyone else. I think we have choice in our lives about absolutely everything.
Okay.
All the big things that we can choose, those are our decisions.
Okay.
Why should we not allow people that choice?
Paul?
Well, I this word choice, I think the euphemistic language, good death, choice, humanity, dignity, I think is very skillful in terms of making this an emotional subject. But the fact is, if this law is brought in and assisted dying is introduced into this country and grows, it will have the effect of desensitizing people towards death. It will normalize this method of death. It will therefore open it up to other people who are in a vulnerable position. It may not be just the terminally ill. We've seen in other countries, if you've got neurological diseases, if you've got anorexia, if you've got depression, if you've got old age, if you've got economic problems, if you're a vulnerable individual, if you're in the care of somebody else who wants to get rid of you, there is all forms of coercion, direct and indirect.
And there would be all forms of checks and balances, wouldn't there?
Yes, there would.
There'll be checks and balances. And then in Canada, in Holland, in Belgium, the checks and balances fell by the wayside. So the checks and balances that have been talked about in Kim Ledbetter's proposal will not stand. They won't last 5 years. They will be challenged legally and they will fail, because people will say, why has that person got the right, or a bigger right than me, to have an assisted death?
Okay. Well, look, we'll hear from you tonight, 08085 909 693. It's such an important debate for us to have, and thank you, Christine and Alana and Paul, for being part of it with us tonight. 08085 909 693. We'll continue with this straight after the news. It's 10:30.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Listen on BBC Sounds.
With the news and sport, I'm Shabnam Yunus-Jewel. Lebanon's state news agency says 4 hospitals in the south of the country are out of action as Israel continues its offensive against Hezbollah. Lebanese emergency services say 11 paramedics have been killed by Israeli strikes in the area. The Foreign Office says 250 British nationals have now left Lebanon on flights chartered by the UK government. A further plane has been chartered for Sunday. Any British nationals in the country have been urged to register their presence. A Metropolitan Police officer has been charged over the death of an 81-year-old woman who was killed in a collision with a motorcycle that was part of an escort for the Duchess of Edinburgh. Helen Holland died in hospital after being hit in May last year. And the police watchdog has launched a criminal investigation into a retired officer who's alleged to have played a role in the wrongful conviction of Andy Malkinson, who spent 17 years in prison for a rape he did not commit. The officer is being investigated for potential misconduct in public office and perverting the course of justice. In sport, Sir Ben Ainsley says Great Britain wants to go all the way now after reaching the America's Cup final for the first time since 1964. The 4-time Olympic champion is captain of the team, which will take on New Zealand for the trophy on the 12th of this month. Ineos Britannia has been heavily backed by Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who's the Manchester United co-owner. While at today's event, he told BBC Sport that the future of the football club's under-pressure manager Eric Ten Hag was not his call. In the Championship, a stoppage-time howler by Leeds goalkeeper Ilan Meslier gifted Sunderland a very late point. It finished 2-2, with Sunderland remaining top of the table and Leeds up to third. In cricket, India suffered a shock 58-run defeat by New Zealand in their opening match of the Women's T20 World Cup in Dubai. South Africa thrashed West Indies by 10 wickets. England get their campaign underway against Bangladesh tomorrow, while South Africa's men defeated Ireland by 174 runs to seal an ODI series win in Abu Dhabi. Hull KR beat Warrington 10-8 to reach their first Super League playoff final. They'll face either Wigan or Leigh, who played their semi-final tomorrow. In women's rugby union, Wales remain bottom of the WXV2 table after an 8-5 defeat to Italy, while in the Premiership there were wins for Northampton and Sale.
On BBC Sounds, Sporting Giants. Delve deep into the lives and careers of some of the biggest names in sports. And hear from those who know, 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 hear from those who know.